Welcome to the channel. For this episode, we're just going to dive right into it. We're not going to do any promotion of my new merch line that's coming out. We're not going to do any like, subscribe, things like that, reminding you that YouTube, goes nutso when their algorithm hits and people interact with the content creators. None of that. We're just going to dive right into the content. So let's do it. JRB, Jean-Robert Bellande, just seemed to pop up on the scene around 2005. He'd been well known among locals in LA and Vegas for a few years, but managed to get himself on the WPT Bad Boys of Poker 2 in 2006. Suddenly, he was well known to millions of poker TV viewers. JRB was born on September 17, 1970 on Long Island. As a youth, he spent time in Taiwan. Prior to poker, he dabbled in many professions, including as a club promoter, with a side interest in pool. Eventually, he settled on poker as his profession. In addition to playing many tournaments in LA and Vegas, he played a lot of cash games, high-stakes cash games. During the early years of the poker boom, JRB really didn't win anything of note. He took second in a World Series event in 2008 and second in a PokerStars PCA event in 2009. In the 2010s, he had a bit more success in tournaments. His only WSOP bracelet came in the $5,000 no-limit six-handed in 2018. In 2015, he finished second in the $50,000 Players' Championship. Bellande really was a creation of WSOP and WPT producers. He was made for television. He used this fame to go on Survivor. He played on Survivor China in 2007, where he eventually finished in 8th place. In July of 2014, JRB was out and about in his Bentley with the license plate JRBROKE when he was pulled over in front of Bellagio. Police took Bellande in on charges of having expired license plates and financial irresponsibility. Bellande spent 16 hours in the Clark County Detention Center. After his release, JRB posted on Instagram that the charges were dropped. Now, Nevada's DMV is notorious for doing a real shitty job at record keeping. At least that's been my experience with them. But JRB transferred his JRBROKE license plate from another car to the Bentley without telling them. So, surprise. Here's a fun fact that may not actually be a fact. Supposedly, Bellande won the Bentley at a poker game at Dan Bilzerian's house. Bellande is still a young man, and he's active at the tables. He cashed once in the WSOP in 2022 and has been recently featured on the newer Poker Go episodes of High Stakes Poker and the streaming show Hustler Casino Live. He made his debut on HCL in August of 2022, and in 2 nights he was up over $800,000. JRB is entertaining. He's good for the game. Let's hope he sticks with it for a while. He's on Twitter if you want to follow what the now married with children JRB is up to. The 2009 WSOP Main Event runner-up probably didn't expect much from his entry into the tournament. He won a satellite at the Wheeling Island Casino in Wheeling, West Virginia. Prior to that accomplishment, Darvin Moon had very little experience in playing tournaments. Like many people at the time, he watched poker on TV and he learned what he could from watching it. Moon was born on October 1st, 1963 in Oakland, Maryland. He ran a small logging business with other family members and spent most of his days in the Maryland Panhandle logging. It was backbreaking work and Moon was a hard worker. In addition to watching a lot of poker on TV, Moon played at local events at the fraternal organizations like the Elks Club and the American Legion. I've used the term everyman before, but Moon personified it. I spent a lot of time in the early 2000s in the Midwest playing in those types of clubs, the Elks Clubs, the American Legions, those types of places. And there were a lot of guys like Moon there. They were, hardworking, blue-collar types. They really just wanted to get away from the manual hard labor that they were used to, get away from it for a day or two and play some poker. Moon took 3 cracks at the main event satellites before winning his seat. His trip to Vegas for the main event was not only his first time in Vegas, but it was also his first time on a commercial flight. When he arrived at the Rio, he thought about just pocketing the $10,000 entry, but changed his mind after walking the floor and taking in the excitement of the WSOP. As for the main event, he had a good run of cards, but also managed to hold his own and overcome adversity. He'd been the chip leader for most of the tournament, but dropped to 10th in chips before making the final table as the chip leader. Moon took second to Joe Cata, earning just over $5 million for his efforts. The poker community was divided on his performance. Phil Hellmuth congratulated Moon and understood that it was a significant accomplishment for someone who had such little experience. Others were more critical of Moon's play. My opinion is that there's a time when some of these poker elitists really need to just sit down and shut up, and let the guy enjoy his moment and understand the main event for what it is. Because, for 360 days out of the year or 350 days, however long it is between events, there's this understanding that the main event is basically just it's like a bingo tournament almost. It's just whoever wins, it's generally luck. I mean, there's some, skill involved. You can argue about it, and I really don't want to turn this into an argument over the main event. But, these people that go after people like Darvin Moon, they just don't understand that, it's guys like Darvin Moon that brought up the popularity of poker. Guys like Darvin Moon that contributed to these 6,000 player fields. So for the poker community to, some of the elitists to get up in arms and say, oh, he's just horrible, luck box, whatever, I think is a bit much. Moon played in a handful of major events after the 2009 WSOP, and eventually he became an ambassador for the Heartland Poker Series. These were Moon's people, and he enjoyed being part of the series. Sadly, Moon passed away on September 19, 2020, after complications from surgery. He was only 56 years old. We've lived on $20,000 to $25,000 a year for 26 years. I can now live the rest of my life comfortably. I'm still working because my entire family was raised that way. How many of you have the Harrington on Hold'em series of books on your bookshelf? I do. Can't say I've been successful at applying Dan's theories to my game, but they certainly worked for him. The Poker Hall of Famer is definitely old school, and much of what Dan wrote wouldn't really work so well in today's no-limit atmosphere, but it worked well for Dan. Dan was born on December 6, 1945 in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Dan started his professional life as a bankruptcy lawyer. Poker and strategy games in general have always appealed to Dan. He was both a champion backgammon player and chess master. Here's a fun fact. When Dan was at Harvard, he played poker with none other than Bill Gates. Dan went on to a successful career as a bankruptcy lawyer. Bill went on, scraped some money together, founded a company called Microsoft, and now he's worth $106 billion. But I gotta say, given the choice, I'd rather have Dan's life. Dan played often during the 1980s at the famous Mayfair Club in New York. Among his competition at the Mayfair was Howard Lederer, Eric Seidel, and Steve Zolotow. One of Dan's major accomplishments is his record in the World Series main event. He first reached the main event table in 1987, where he finished sixth. His next appearance was a much better result. He won it all in 1995 and took home $1 million. In the Chris Moneymaker year of 2003, he took third place. But wait, there's more. The following year, in 2004, he took fourth. Say what you want about the old schoolers versus the math robots that dominate today, but you can never tell me that it isn't absolutely remarkable to make final tables of the main event in 3 different decades and 2 years in a row during what were the largest fields in the history of the event. This explains why his book sold so well. Dan has over $6.6 million in lifetime tournament wins. He has 2 WSOP bracelets, and he won the 2007 WPT Championship at the Bicycle Casino in Los Angeles. The 77-year-old resident of Santa Monica still plays. His last tournament cash was at an event at the Wynn Las Vegas in 2021. Dan is a true legend of the game. His accomplishments are probably underrated by a lot of people because Dan was one of those players that never sought, the spotlight. He never bragged about what he did. He was another one of those players that just went in and they let their playing do the talking for them. You just heard me go on about Dan Harrington and his 3-decade run at the World Series main event. Here's another accomplishment that some may say is even more remarkable than Dan's. Michael the Grinder Mizrachi won the WSOP $50,000 Players Championship 3 times. He won it in 2010, 2012, and 2018. That's absolutely remarkable. In total, Mizrachi has over $17 million in tournament winnings, nearly $5 million from those 3 wins. The Grinder was born on January 5th, 1981 in Miami. He started playing poker at 13 years old. He had his sights on becoming a doctor, but dropped out of college to pursue poker. Poker has been very good to Michael. In addition to 5 World Series bracelets, Michael was a fixture at WPT tournaments and made several final tables. In 2005, he won the WPT LA Poker Classic, defeating a final table that included Eric Lindgren and Ted Forrest. In 2010, All In Magazine named Mizrachi their Player of the Year. Here's a fun fact. The Grinder's a family man. He used to take the family to various events in a mobile home. They'd all pile in and they'd drive around the country, and sometimes he'd take his fraternal twin brother Eric with them. Back in the day, the grinder's wife, Adili, would also play, and she was featured on the WPT's Second Ladies Night. She and the grinder, unfortunately, divorced in 2016. Before the divorce in 2010, Mizrachi was hit with a tax lien from the IRS for not claiming winnings on his tax returns from 2005 to 2007. Coming up with the cash to pay Uncle Sam may have contributed to his having 2 properties foreclosed. Through all of this, the grinder has continued to play poker, and as we've seen, he did very well in the 2010s. He had 7 cashes in the 2022 World Series. Michael still lives in Florida, and I'm pretty sure we're going to see him play at high levels for many years to come. Let's hope so. Back in the day, those of us who frequented poker forums like 2+2 noticed the name Annette 15 being mentioned often in the online poker forums and news, views, and gossip. Many of the up-and-coming personalities talked about were online players, but few of those were female online players. For many of the neckbeards and trolls that frequented 2+2, Annette was an easy target for derision. It's disappointing but not surprising. For the rest of us, she was an example of how online poker opened up opportunities for people from all over the world, and how a 15-year-old girl from Norway could mix it up and defeat players from anywhere else. Annette claims that she never deposited money online. She earned money from free rolls and used that to build up a bankroll. Between Ultimate Bet, Full Tilt, and PokerStars, her winnings over a 6-month period in 2006-2007 approached $1 million. Live players who didn't pay much attention to online players learned about Annette when she won the inaugural World Series of Poker Europe Main Event. She earned £1 million for the win, which at that time was just over $2 million, the largest amount won by a female player. Her total live tournament earnings are just over $3.9 million. Her latest tournament cash was back in 2018 at the World Series in Vegas. Today, Annette lives in Vegas with her husband, and she seems pretty pleased about putting the poker life behind her. Today, she has a YouTube channel that features her love of makeup. That's right, Annette's Makeup Corner. Check it out. I can't believe I've done 8 of these videos. After the first one, hit 100,000 views, I thought, well, maybe I'll do like 10 of these. But now we're looking at 20, maybe, right? We'll see. Thanks to your input and your suggestions. And remember, like the video, subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.